Thank you for joining us for our fourth COVID-19 webinar hosted by Emmanuel Chapel. This is the fourth in a series of webinars that Emmanuel Chapel has hosted to bring some topical issues to light as the nation battles COVID-19. The theme is unity, faith, peace, and progress. Some of us may recognize that this theme is derived from Nigeria's coat of arms. We focus on this at a time when the COVID-19 crisis has starkly revealed the underlying conditions of our country and triggered what is probably the biggest and worst challenge it will ever face in terms of a looming and unparalleled economic meltdown. Today, COVID-19 pandemic has evolved from being a health challenge to a multifaceted global pandemic. It has become a global showstopper, disrupting several areas of our human existence. Though it started in the health sector, the rippling effects of the pandemic are visibly and possibly more evident in various areas and has become an humanitarian, economic, leadership, and governance crisis, therefore crippling our common humanity. Rather than close ranks and use our common humanity to fight this menace, columnists are now using our various religious identities to create more divisions through conspiracy theories. Marcus Aurelius, a first-century Roman emperor and philosopher, aptly captures our theme for today in his quote as follows: "Accept the things to which faith binds you, and love the people with whom faith brings you together, but do so with all your heart." Like Aurelius said, if we can unite irrespective of creed or culture, we can live in peace and together fight this menace that has eroded our world. On that note, once again, I would like to formally welcome you to this fourth COVID-19 webinar hosted by the Emmanuel Chapel. At this session, we will aim to identify the main religious and sociocultural challenges that have hindered our cohesiveness as a people and encourage an interfaith dialogue with our distinguished panelists. My name is Tonya Adeniji. I am an executive director at the Bank of Industry. I will be your moderator for this session. This evening, we are honored to have a very rich and distinguished team of panelists that will be sharing deep insights from their experience. And it is such an honor for me to introduce them. First, we have Professor Ibrahim Gambari, CFR. Professor Gambari is a renowned scholar and diplomat who retired as Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. He was Nigeria's Minister for External Affairs between 1984 and 1985. He has chaired and led several international commissions and peace missions at the African Union Commission and at the United Nations. He was the pioneer chancellor of the Kwara State University and has held and still holds top academic positions with leading universities all over the world. Professor Gambari is a leading global expert on peace and reconciliation matters. He is well recognized and has received many accolades globally. We are glad to have you on the panel, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Mr. A.B. Mahmood, SAN. Mr. Mahmood is the former president of the Nigerian Bar Association and former Attorney General of Kano State. He was the first vice president of the Nigerian Stock Exchange and a member of the Nigeria Judicial Institute. He is also the Pro-Chancellor, Kano State University of Science and Technology, and sits on several boards. Mr. Mahmood has been very instrumental in the peace and reconciliation talks in Kano State and other regions of Nigeria. We are glad to have you on the panel, sir.
Thank you very much.
Our third panelist is His Grace, Most Reverend Kehinde Stephen. His Grace is the former Archbishop Ibadan, Archdiocese Methodist Church of Nigeria. He was the pioneer chair of Africa Methodist Council and is a trustee of the Epworth Old Rectory, the historical birthplace of the Wesleys. His Grace has held executive positions and charged with senior roles in the Methodist Church in Nigeria and at the World Council of Churches. His Grace has been very involved with peace and reconciliation matters in different parts of the world. We are glad to have you on the panel, sir.
Thank you very much.
I will now start with a general question posed to all the panelists. And it goes, given the complexities brought on by the COVID-19 issues in Nigeria, and seeing how our stated national aspirations for unity, faith, peace, and progress are playing out at this moment, COVID-19 certainly has exposed the fragility and cracks in our nationhood. And we see in this a myriad of issues in the country today, from lockdown to poverty to religious polarization. And what is clear is that Nigeria is disunited. And so to frame the issues that work against our unity, our faith, peace, and progress in Nigeria, the question to our distinguished panelists is, or the questions are, how can we as a country and do we do more together as a people? And to start, we'll go to Professor Gambari, and then we'll go to His Grace, and Mr. Mahmood will then take the question. So Professor Gambari, please.
Well, thank you very much. I think a number of world leaders have regarded this COVID-19 as a war. I think our own president said, this is not a joke. Certainly it is not a joke. And if you take the analogy of a war, you don't win a war except by understanding the enemy. And two, you don't win a war except you are united and you mobilize your entire resources. So I think this COVID-19 is an opportunity for us to us. Or how do we mobilize our entire resources, human, material, governmental, religious, civil society, to in effect remove all the obstacles that prevent us from mobilizing our resources to find a common enemy or to promote a common national agenda. And to me, what is very dear to my heart is really how to achieve a common ground and how to have a common understanding of what it is that needs to be done and the nature of the enemy. So, and for me, therefore, it's about dialogue. And I feel very strongly that in our country, and in many times in conflict situations that I've been privileged to try to mediate, people don't talk to each other, they talk at each other. And when you talk at each other instead of to each other, then the opportunities to have a common ground, to build a common understanding becomes even more difficult. So everybody has a role, and leadership, of course, is always the key.
Thank you very much, Professor Gambari. I hear the need to dialogue. We need to speak to each other and not at each other. And also, I pick up that leadership is something that is also very critical. I'll now pass this on to Your Grace, sir, to take the same question.
Very much. I agree largely with the position of Professor Gambari, and I want to say that personally, talking about Nigeria, I was very excited, as most people would have been, 60 years ago when the idea of the sovereignty of Nigeria came into being. You know, really very excited. And I remember at school being taught over and over again to sing the old national anthem. And there are two lines there that make significant difference. First, identifying who we are as people. Talking about, you know, though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. You know, these words are strong and a kind of commitment to the oneness and indivisibility of our nation. And every citizen was supposed and is supposed to exercise strong faith in the Nigerian nation and to work towards peace and progress of the country. And in those words of the national anthem, you also have a prayer, you know, and you know, I'm very interested in that said also, help us to build our nation where no one is oppressed, and so in peace and plenty, Nigeria may be blessed. And so the question is, and for me it is important for us to look at the relationship between religion and the Nigerian state and where the tensions are. But I want to say that religion and religious communities or groups, you know, have always had powerful position, powerful influence in the activities of the country. And if you look at our historical past and how we are, you find out that religious communities have made tremendous and major contributions to the development of our country. And let me remind you of the contributions maybe to education, to healthcare, and the building of major hospitals, and their broad and varied contributions to the emergence of the Nigerian elite. At the same time, religion and religious communities sometimes have done so terribly bad. They've done bad things, sometimes heightening the sense of the fragility of the polity and undermining the corporate existence of the country. So I believe that any discussion on bearing on religion and public life in the country must take cognizance of its dual and ambiguous nature and legacy, because we are talking about the fragility, and this is actually true. And then how do we proceed? How do we, you know, coming from our past, recognizing the important roles religious bodies have played, organization, and, you know, also understanding that there have been some negative things as well. How do we proceed? How do we understand each other? Because we still want to contribute. We still want to continue to play, you know, lively and active role in the affairs of the country. So we have to examine terms of faith and reason. What is the relationship? What is happening? How do we cooperate? And that's why I said that I agree largely with the previous speaker that dialogue is important, and dialogue that has room for openness and so on. I can come back on that again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. And I really like the, you know, bringing in those parts of the old national anthem. And I was trying to think very quickly of our our national anthem to see if there were any parallels between the old and the new. But thank you very much. And yes, I hear again that our faith, and indeed the church and other religious institutions, played a large role, be it in education, in health, in different sectors. And so all of this cannot stop, and we still have to dialogue and bring this to the forefront to move the country towards our aspirations of unity, faith, peace, and progress. I would now like to turn this to Mr. Mahmood to give us his thoughts on this question.
Well, thank you very much, Toyin. And first, let me begin by thanking my friend, Reverend Ajayi, a part-time lawyer now, for inviting me to this very important and distinguished platform to discuss the burning issues of the moment. So congratulations for putting this together. I must say that I agree largely with Professor Gambari, as well as His Grace, Right Reverend Michael Stephen, for the very insightful comments I've made. Now, obviously, this pandemic has exposed the fragility not just of our healthcare system, as Toyin rightly pointed out, but indeed the grave weakness of our social, economic, and governance institutions. Of course, we know that Nigeria has always been a fragile state, but this pandemic has brought out this to a much greater extent. Now, this should be a wake-up call for us, in the country. And I'd like to say that for me, the most important and urgent issue of the moment is that we mobilize to support the efforts to contain the pandemic, regardless of our position in society and regardless of our faith. This, as Professor Gambari said, is a war, and it requires all our resources. Now, we must also show care and compassion to our fellow citizens, regardless of where they are and what their inclinations are, or regardless of their faith. So this is the key. This is the second key message, the requirement for this trying moment. But as we grapple with these issues, we need to begin to think ahead in terms of how do we shape a better tomorrow, address all the key issues of governance, key issues of all the shortcomings in our infrastructures, whether it be the health infrastructure or other infrastructures of society. I think the pandemic, if anything, has exposed all the weak states. You can see from a broad study of the international terrain, you see that societies with stronger institutions tend to fare better in the management of the pandemic. And societies with weaker institutions have been shown to be very vulnerable. So this is a wake-up call to Nigerians and to the younger people especially, to begin to really determine and see how they can get involved in a positive sense in the affairs of our country as we go forward. So this will be the brief opening comments I'll make, and I look forward to the rest of the engagement. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahmood. And I think I like the fact that what the addition is that we need to now look into the future, introducing the pandemic and how do we contain the pandemic. This is something as a country we have to do on our own. We have to solve or win this battle. And so the need for strong institutions and a wake-up call for all of us, because what was common in all the comments was that all our resources we have to bring to the table to fight and to really work towards these our aspirations, our national aspirations. Before I go to the next questions, I'll just like to tell our audience that we do want to take questions from the audience. This is an interactive session to the extent that we can. And so if you can please send your questions on Facebook, we will be able to take those questions later on in the discussion. So the questions will be, come through Facebook. So to move on, I would like to move this into looking at peace, having peace as a nation. And I think that's a good segue from the previous, from the discussion we have had so far. I would like to take advantage that all our panelists are experts on peace and reconciliation in their various fields. And so we know that if there is no peace, we will not be able to fight this menace that has invaded our world. And so I would like to ask some questions, and I'll go to the different panelists and ask the questions, and then we'll take the discussion forward. My next question is to His Grace, Most Reverend Stephen. Our religious practices are deeply fragmented and thoroughly politicized across the nation. In several parts of the nation, religion appears to be weaponized as an instrument of political engagement. This pandemic has run through several religious rituals, with giving at the heart of most, and we're expected to be our brother's keepers and compelled to give by hand. And indeed, some have given. Sir, my question is, do we continue to give by hand alone? Or can we give also with our heart and with our mind? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think that's a good question. And I just want to say that the challenge that COVID-19 has brought, has put us into is a challenge where we must, start whichever religious bodies we are, wherever we are. I think the important question for me is that how can we as religious community serve people in need during this COVID-19? And I believe that it's we have a responsibility to our nation. We have a responsibility to each other, that we as one people, that we must do a lot. I think there is a relationship between our faith and reason that makes us want to respect and do something, for our society. And but I would want to talk in terms of the religious bodies always talk, and we've done this in the past, we are doing this presently, but we can do more. We can support the COVID-19 by disseminating public health guidance and encouraging compliance. I think we are in this together. We must, and this is something that we have to do every time. We have to ensure that, who gets meals, who are the first responders, we are the vulnerable groups, around us in our own communities. Now we have to be able to organize and move things in the way that we know how to do it. How many people are picking up meals around our mosques and churches? I'm not saying congregate, just people to know that they can go one and buy 2 or 3 or find other ways of making sure that through our churches, our mosques, the people are cared for. I have seen some signs of this, but I think we can do more. We can do much more. How are we giving out masks and hand sanitizers, supplying to indigent people, including our own members in our congregation? Now, how are we encouraging people who have recovered from virus to donate, to donate whatever they have to donate towards potential treatments, via the NCDC? These are questions that I think we have to relate to because when we talk about peace, the peace that we are talking about has to land on people, and people have to be happy that this is happening, and that would make a lot of difference in the attitude to what they do. And I believe that it is important that we must cooperate as religious bodies, with the government to serve the people in need. That is the first thing the people see. And then all of the things we say about encouraging them to understand peace, practical actions of peace will make sense when they see us frontline doing things together and promoting their own welfare. And that is what religious institutions should attempt to do at this time. Follow the blueprints or guidelines provided by government for the delivery of services. And then when we do this, I believe that the consequence of our action is also going to promote the peace, the understanding, the well-being, the living together in harmony that question intends for us to answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. And I really like the way when you say that the peace has to do with the people. But sir, I'd like to take you on to just help us understand this a bit more. When you say that we need to support the people by disseminating public content, so that the people understand what the situation is and know what they have to do. Information on public health and the like. Can you help us, sir, on how can this be achieved?
I'd like to say that if you the government or the task force has been talking about people not complying. There is an ease of on lockdown, and people appear not to be adhering to it as much as possible. We have a responsibility as religious bodies, religious organizations, to assist in practical ways. That is, if occasionally you go out and you see your business, maybe your member's business, something's happening and you are getting there, instead of them saying, "Welcome, sir," they ask you, "Yes, do you have your face mask?" And you are asking them as well to comply with those things. We must have the courage to tell people. I went somewhere not too far to get some fuel this morning, and I asked the attendant, "Please, you cannot attend to me. You don't have your face mask on." I have my own face mask on. I will drive off. I think we want to do this to help. And by so doing, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Not to stay comfortable. We still have the leadership, the position, the authority to say things, and we have followers that will listen to us. Those are the kind of lines that I'm thinking of.
Thank you very much, sir. And in other words, we have to be our brother's keeper. In our country. With COVID-19, there have been discordant tunes from Christian and Muslim leaders on the ban of religious activities in the light of this pandemic. Peace and unity are threatened. And my question is this: is Nigeria a secular state or not? And why is religion so central to our political decision-making? Mr. Mahmood?
Whether Nigeria is a secular state or not. First of all, Section 10 of the Constitution, of our Constitution, clearly states that government that the government of the Federation or the state shall not adopt any religion as a state religion. I think, as far as I know, this is the relevant section that tries to define the nature of the Nigerian state as far as religion is concerned. There's nowhere in particular where the word secular is used. And of course, a lot of people may, especially in very religious communities, may find the terminology secular a bit offensive. But I think what is important is that the Constitution itself has made this provision, and it has also clearly defined the rights of individuals to freedom of religion, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, that Section 38 of the Constitution provides. This is not just as an individual right, but as a collective right. So what we need is a very consistent and uniform application of this principle, both in terms of policy and in terms of administrative practices, so that the state builds confidence in the citizen of its impartiality as far as matters of this nature are concerned. So, but unfortunately, our practices, in my view, leave a lot of room for improvement. The state is not very consistent. You hear political leaders and also making certain pronouncements and also taking certain action, which seem to be in conflict with these very clear provisions of the Constitution. So freedom of religion, yes. Freedom of association, yes. Freedom of conscience, yes. And establishing a framework for these freedoms to be realized is very key. Now, with regards to religious bodies sending discordant tunes to their followers, I think what is clear is that the Nigerian state, and here I'm trying to draw a distinction between religion on the one hand and religious institutions and religious leaders on the other hand. Now, no modern state can exist without its being able to establish its authority within its territory under its control. So all religious institutions and all religious leaders must be under the control of the state. And it is the state that needs to define the framework by which religious institutions and religious leaders operate. So every religious institution, every religious leader has a duty to promote the public policies and the laws of the country that have been clearly established. And if there is any disagreement with any law or regulation, then that is a matter to be negotiated with the state. And then until it is altered, the authority of the state must prevail. So let me illustrate this a little bit. Supposing the state comes up with a law, we must drive on the right-hand side of our roads. No religious authority or institution should be able to say, let's drive on the left, or let's block public highways because we want to congregate. So these are the ways in which the state needs to establish authority in a very firm and clear manner, and engage in dialogue where there is a need to alter those laws or regulations. If a church or a mosque or a religious organization undertakes taxable activities, for instance, the state must be able to tax those activities. And that is one clear way in which the state will establish its relevance and its authority. So in times of pandemic, this is totally out of sync to expect that the state will be sending one message to the people, the religious bodies will be sending discordant tunes to the people. So this cannot be allowed. Once the state has credibility and is established authority in a fair and equitable manner, this thing shouldn't be difficult to observe. And on the part of the citizens, I think what is important is public enlightenment. And this public enlightenment does not start, when you are adults or whatever. Right from our school days, right from our primary school, we need to educate people. We need to educate the children to understand what the religion is about and what it is to exist in a multi-religious society. I'll give an example here. Some years back, I went to visit my friend in Oxford. And he had small children at the time who were attending primary school. And then I accompanied him to go to the primary school to pick them up after school. And what did I see in the school? There was an exhibition in the school on Islamic religion. And there are all sorts of information about what Islam is all about. And this is a largely Christian community. But you had this exhibition, explaining the basic principle to educate and explain things so that people grow up understanding that there is more that unites us than really that divides us. Many of the principles of all the major religions tend to emphasize the same facts, and I mean the same principles and values. But it's in our application or interpretation of this that, of course, a lot of problems tend to come. So yes, my main message here is Nigeria we have not used the word secular in our constitution, but we have said they should not adopt any religious state religion. This is both federal and state. We have freedoms of religion enshrined in our constitution. So this is a kind of treaty that we must respect in a multi-religious society. As far as sending discordant tunes are concerned, all religious institutions must obey the law of the land. And as far as education is concerned, it must be a top priority for public institutions and public policy. So thank you very much for it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahmood. I'd like to ask a follow-on question just before we move to my next round of questions. So the state has to establish authority over religious institutions and religious leaders. And therefore, they are the ones that now pass on information or have some level of control over their followers or over the followers. Now, in Nigeria of today, and in light of the COVID-19 situation with lockdown today, closed borders today, ease the lockdown tomorrow, curfew, and just so many directives. And it appears that they are not always being observed. Could we say, or could it be that the state does not have control? And how does this play out?
Well, clearly the Nigerian state, as we all know, has a credibility deficit in many respects. And these are the kind of things this pandemic creates an opportunity for us to begin to address long term, to see how we can improve the quality of governance and quality of our institutions and the transparency of governance itself, and to really hold leaders accountable. The relationship between states and religious institutions, in my view, the demands are very clear. And my view, I'm being very careful here. I'm not talking about state controlling religion. I'm talking about state controlling religious institutions and religious leaders being able to operate within the framework of the rules. So if there are discordant tunes coming from religious leaders, brought out by state agencies. So they have no choice, in my view. Of course, like I said, this is not a matter that can be established, just at an instant like this. We have a historical legacy problem of credibility of state institutions, and this will take time to redress. But this is the direction in which we need to go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahmood. I will now ask direct the next question to Professor Gambari. Sir, we have already established that there is agitation, anger, and unrest at all levels in the society. And this is regardless of class, religion, and tribe. We live in a society with more than 82 million poor, according to Nigerian Board of Statistics, and with up to 54% of Nigerians living on less than $2 per day. And this is according to the World Bank. My question is this, sir. How do we bring about peace and progress amongst the angry in society?
Well, first of all, I would like to go a step back on this issue of secular state and religion. I think it should be, if you permit me, I mean, by mentioning secular state, it only means that the state shall not adopt one religion as a state religion. But it doesn't say, or it's not meant to be, that the state will have no religion. And it's very clear that in our country, Nigeria, we're a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country. So the distinction should be clear. By secularism, it means the state shall not adopt a state religion or one of them. But the state absolutely has to protect the right of not religious affiliation, religious thoughts, and all of that. And I have a personal experience too, which I would like to share. My son went to a Catholic primary school. It happened to be in the United States when I was ambassador of our country to the UN. And the teachers had problems with him because he was having difficulties understanding the concept of Holy Trinity. And, but they never gave up to explain. Then he himself came, a young boy, and said, well, he's beginning to understand the concept of the Holy Trinity, but also this predominantly or almost completely Catholic school there was a prospect of explanation, of dialogue, to the extent that when he graduated, guess what? In this, please at each other, you are not going to promote consensus. But going back to your question, now, Twain, here's there was a story during the period of the early years of the nationalist movement that the northern leader, Ahmadu Bello Sardauna of Sokoto, was meeting with Chief Awolowo, and they were having a meeting with Azikwe, the three of them. And Azikwe is said to have made the point that let us forget our differences. Let us build this nation, Nigeria. Let us fight together for independence. But Sardauna was supposed to have replied, no, let's not forget our differences. Let us understand our differences. Then let us, out of those differences, whether it's ethnic, religious, linguistic, let's forge a common ground. And if you look at the history of the country, I'm glad that history is being restored to our curriculum, which was, I think, was unfortunate that it was omitted. Out of that, they forged a common consensus, common ground. It was through the common ground that they got independence. It was through a common ground that they settled for a federal structure of our country, which remains up till today. Now, there will always be differences, you know, and that's why you don't make peace with friends. You make peace with people with whom you have differences, ideological differences, political differences, economic differences, philosophical differences. And so for me, it is how to build out of those, the understanding, common understanding, promoting a common ground that will really be able to survive as a nation and fight and meet challenges. Let me give you another example that is very critical. People may be angry, and right, the inequality in our country is growing. But although I must say also it's becoming a global phenomenon, this inequality between the rich and the poor. So you have inequality, you have differences of perception, we have political differences, ideological differences. But point must be made that if we want to successfully meet our challenges as a issue. You have to to have the nexus must be understood and accepted, that without peace, indeed, there can be no progress, there can be no development.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for that. And I think in that first round of questions, we see that dialogue is critical, inclusiveness, getting to the nexus of peace, building strong institutions, and of course, understanding that there's a constitution that guides the secularity or not. And as we know, Nigeria is not a secular state, at least the constitution does not support that. We have a lot of questions coming in from our audience, but before we go to the audience, I would still like to quickly, if time permitting, run through one more set of questions for our distinguished panelists, and then we will go to Q&A from our audience. The questions are coming in from Facebook and also from Zoom, if that is a preferred platform. My next question, I'll go round again, goes to His Grace. And I have two questions in one. They often say that we can build a modern state in which religion simply provides universal moral direction, and our religious practices are now deeply polarized across the nation. Is COVID-19 and the underlying crisis we see, is it also a crisis of faith? And does this crisis, does it provide a unique opportunity to explore and resolve inter and intra-faith schisms for a better Nigeria? Your Grace, sir.
Interesting. COVID-19 crisis that we have upon us is, well, you probably, some people might look at it as a crisis of faith or an opportunity to understand our faith better as it relates to other people. And I think I would like to say that when it comes to, and my understanding that, religious groups have always, tended to cooperate with the government to serve people, even with COVID-19. Now, and these corporate endeavors, these attempt to, meet the government and respond to people, comes out of our sense of social responsibility. And as institutions, regardless of different constituents of civil society, the important institutions attempt to cooperate with government, and they follow the blueprint of or guidelines provided by government. But however, there have been also other occasions when religious institutions and communities challenge the government, either to do a better job in serving the needs of the people. Their willingness to challenge the government is a consequence of their sense of responsibility, which probably motivates them to change or expand or do something. Now, with this crisis of COVID-19, yes, some people, the religious bodies, some of them are sensitive to the fact that, okay, you cannot do what you know how to do, you cannot gather, you cannot do all these things. Is it a direct crisis? Poor understanding of faith in itself, because our actions must protect actions towards our neighbor. So I don't think that the COVID-19 is an opportunity for us to understand other dimensions of our responsibility to reach out in ways that we have not done before. And to, in this case, for me personally, all the efforts of government are in the right move towards in the right direction. I read an article yesterday about the crisis that religious leadership had, took on themselves in the Bible Belt of the United States, when a lot of these big-time television pastors, tend to say to their people, no, nobody can stop us. No, we can read a couple of Psalms. We have the faith, so don't listen to physical distancing, do all these things. And as a result, as many as 30 pastors of various churches, have died. We see that if you look at the report of COVID-19, on the air, it talked about the fact that the Black population suffer. The fact of the matter is, many of them choose to ignore, the social, physical distancing. They still gather at funerals and so on. And so is grave. I believe that COVID-19 is an opportunity for us to deepen our faith, to understand, who we are, what is the faith that we are talking about, and to distinguish between bad beliefs and good beliefs. And I think if we can understand that and move people in that direction, I think it's an opportunity for us, to understand that we must reach to our neighbor. We cannot, to get peace, we have to have peace with God, peace with ourselves, peace with our neighbors, and peace with our environment. All of those things must go together. I don't see any challenge, but I see an opportunity here for religious leadership to reflect and come out in more positive light, if they have not already been doing so, to protect the and their friends.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The next question will go to Professor Gan. And we see here that indeed the COVID-19 is definitely revealing underlying conditions. We're able to now formulate good directives based on faith, on peace, dialogue, coming together. We have to be our brother's keeper. Everyone has a role. All our resources have to come to light. And my question to Professor Gambari is a question I asked before, but slightly changed. With the pandemic deepening a very fragile and nearly broken Nigeria, and indeed a lot of giving, religious institutions, religious leaders have a role to play. Indeed, the government has a role to play. Private sector has a role to play. We know that COVID, I don't even know what the numbers are right now, but indeed COVID by the private sector, they've also are playing their own role. Churches, mosques have donated generously. The question I want to ask, which we've already dealt with, His Grace talked about giving by heart and by mind. My question to you, sir, is irrespective of religion, how can we give without discriminating? And how can we care? How can we show this care impactfully? Thank you very much, sir.
That's a very long question, but I'll try to have a short answer. I agree totally with His Grace that we should see this COVID-19 as an opportunity. The cracks have always been there, and but this is an opportunity to reframe the issue. And that opportunity is to really have a common narrative that we're in this together. If you look at the paradox, this COVID-19 is a global pandemic, but look at the reaction. When people are threatened, look at the reaction. The reaction was national, you know, almost like every nation for itself and God for us all, if you want to be cynical. As a matter of fact, it is in Africa, and we must be proud of this, that while the European Union was struggling, while the United Nations, where I've spent almost a quarter of a century of my own adult experience, is struggling to promote a common cause, in the end, it is we, the Africans, took this at the national level, okay? And then when, in the case of ECOWAS, we had 15 heads of states came together on the 23rd of March and say, how can we have a regional approach to addressing this pandemic? And they set up a regional action plan. Then the African Union itself, you know, in a kind of concentric circle with Nigeria nation as the core, then West Africa, then Africa, and then we're waiting for the rest of the world to show leadership. So what I'm suggesting is that if a global pandemic is being responded to nationally, that should show us that really we Nigerians, we have to find what is the best in us. We have to mobilize our resources as best as possible in order to defeat it, okay? We're cooperating first with our neighbors, then with West Africa, and then obviously the African continent. But I will go back to the premise of your question, that is this a crisis of religion or not? I would say it's an opportunity for better governance in our country. For example, I believe that this pandemic shows that our national priorities being re-examined. Nobody, even with private jets, whether they are religious leaders or secular leaders, with their private, they can't go anywhere for treatment. How come we have neglected our health sector? Now, as a result of the summit of the West Africans, they said 15% of the budget must go henceforth to health. Now, these are the things that we should have been doing, you know, appropriate percentage for health, for education, for science and technology, for research. Perhaps we should have been at the cutting edge of finding a solution, a vaccine for this pandemic. So I would say this COVID provides us an opportunity to redress our national priority, to redress the poor funding of our health and educational institutions, to redress the neglect of science and technology, but also an opportunity to also, I think it's A.B. Mahmoud who mentioned the trust deficit. How do we rebuild the trust between the leaders and the people, the governed and those who are governing us? Because unless there's trust between the leadership and the people, unless our national priorities are gotten right, unless we allocate resources to the most important national action, unless we are inclusive, then we'll have missed tremendous opportunity, which this COVID-19 has really provided for us to look at these critical deficits in governance.
Thank you very much, Professor Gambari. I'm being prompted now that the audience, the questions are really, really rolling in. And so I'm going to change things a little bit, but still stay in line. My next question is to Mr. Mahmoud, but I'm going to change the question to one from the audience. A lot of questions have come in, and I'm going to try and pick the questions and go to the, as much as I can, to the appropriate panelist. I have a question here coming from Kano. And the question is, though Section 10 of the Constitution has prohibited or prohibits adoption of state religion, does the same Constitution, or with the same Constitution, should decisions of national connotations not relegate religious sentiments to the background? And I think that's a question for Mr. Mahmoud.
I'm not sure I understand the question though. Do you want to clarify it a bit?
Okay. I'm reading it straight, but I think what what is being asked is that though Section 10 of the Constitution prohibits adoption of state religion, it says, should decisions of national connotations not relegate religious sentiments to the background?
Well, I guess if I understand it correctly, yes, the Constitution is very clear in terms of prohibition of state religion, but we're also a federal country. We have a federal structure of government, and we know that there's great diversity in religious manifestations across the country, and obviously also in cultural and other attitudes towards religious issues. So at the national level, yes, I will tend to agree with the questioner that we ought to have a structure that allows for a lot of delegation or devolution of responsibility or powers to the federating units, such that we can manage these diversities more appropriately. There's no need to take local issues to national level and legislate or give directives on it if they can be handled more effectively and more efficiently at the local levels. So if that's what the person asking the question means, that matters of religion should be devolved to the federating units, I entirely agree with him. But even then, it has to be within the framework of the Constitution, because though religious manifestations vary a lot, but Nigerians do reside in every country. So they're entitled to protection of wherever they are residing as Muslims, whether they're in Lagos or in Rivers or in the Niger Delta or in the East, as Christians, whether they're in Zamfara or in Kano or wherever they reside, they're entitled to equal protection before the law. So yes, we can devolve powers, we can devolve responsibilities, but we have to ensure that rights are protected and that there's equality before the law. I don't know if that addresses the question, but yeah. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahmood. I believe the person who posted that question hopefully is is satisfied with that contribution. I'll take about 2 more questions, and then we'll go to the concluding remarks. Another question I have, I'll read the question. It says, religious intolerance has divided us immensely, contributed to mistrust, even in every aspect of our polity. How will you answer to enlighten? How will you answer this to enlighten citizens? Religious intolerance has divided us immensely and have contributed to mistrust, even to every aspect of our polity. I'll pose this question to Professor Gambari, please, if you could help us.
I thought you posed it to the most Reverend Stephen, but I will do my best to.
I have another one for him.
All right, no problem. As a layman, I think it's the answer is really more interfaith dialogue, and interfaith dialogue with a serious intent to promote a common understanding. It is not the religious differences themselves that are the problem. It's really how we address them, and how, if you see in the Nigerian context, how, I'm sorry to say, how some politicians who are devoid of any ideological position, who are devoid of program of how to address our challenges, that use religion, ethnicity, even class, in order to get power. So it's, for them, is about power, and they will use whatever they can use. So what I'm suggesting is that, the more we promote interfaith dialogue, the more in which we really recognize the role of leadership. I come to this from time to time because leadership has responsibility, just as power is a trust. So we have religious leaders, we have community leaders, we have civil society leaders, we have leaders at the local government, state government, and national. The leadership of these groups and institutions have a role to play to stress what is common to all of us, what the common humanity. Look at this COVID-19. It doesn't discriminate in terms of who gets infected. You know, the impact may be higher on, as we are seeing, on the less privileged, but it doesn't discriminate. That's why I said at one of our, I think, conversations that when in Kano, some people were saying that, oh, this COVID-19, this coronavirus is a pandemic of the rich by the rich for the rich. Well, it's mistaken, because I'm sitting as the pro-chancellor of Bayero University, Kano. I can say that 4 of our professors who are professionals, who are victims, who have the ability to contribute to resolving this problem, we lost them. We lost them. So we have to emphasize that in order to meet our challenges, you know, in general as a nation, but also to defeat this pandemic, then it is we have to stress that all of us have a role to play in promoting a common understanding, a common commitment, in order to be able to find a constructive resolution. That would be my response.
Thank you very much, Professor Gambari. And that question was from Engineer Adeyemi Adefule, and I hope you have your answer there. The next question I'm going to take is from Uloma Ike, and I'm going to direct it at His Grace, Reverend Stephen. And the question is, how can the major religions work together in practical terms to promote peace and unity at this time? That was a question from Uloma Ike. How can the major religions work together in practical terms to promote peace and unity at this time? I combine that with another similar question, also to His Grace, sir, which is asking us that, to what extent can the common challenge of COVID-19 promote unity of faith in Nigeria? And this is from Dr. Olubukola Ulugasa from Babcock University. I believe these 2 questions are similar, and I'll direct it at Your Grace, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me just give a practical example, by way of responding to the first question. I had the privilege of serving on the Oyo State Security Council, an interstate body, when we get to when we get there, we sit. We had the representative of CAN, Christian Association of Nigeria. Then we have the Islamic organization that is they come at Muslims, and then there was protest that we have abandoned the African traditional religion. So there was a representative of the traditional religion. And the rule was that when you come to the meeting, you must sit by other person. That is, I had a friend, an Islamic scholar by my side, and then the traditional worshiper by my side, and so on. And then we sit and we started talking. Now there was this discussion on noise pollution. And there was the thing, who is more guilty? Which religion is most guilty? Is it the Islamic religion? Is it Christian religion? And so on. And so we all came to the conclusion that all religions actually make far too much noise, and we must allow some legislation to come into place. And you cannot believe it. It worked very well that 2 or 3 of us from different religious background or faith background go out together to parks, to other places, to try and educate people about the dangers of noise pollution. We work together, and then it's interesting, and this can go on. I believe that the more opportunity of religious leadership coming together of different faiths will solve this problem. One of the challenges we have is that the governments want to control this. we are of the opinion, I'm of the opinion that, look, I can walk across to the imam and the next street and we can find opportunities of talking, of relating. And this makes a world of difference. And that is the way to go. Maybe somebody defined fanaticism when you talk about intolerance, religious intolerance and so on. Most of this stem from fanaticism. And there is a definition of fanaticism that I think is good for everyone to go with. That is, you become fanatical when you have missed your point. So when you miss your aim, you become fanatical, and it leads to a lot of things. The function of faith is different. Faith comes in at very, very deep level. At whatever, whether it's Islamic religion, Christian faith, it comes as a deeper movement of the heart. And so what the manifestation, I once referred to it as bad beliefs, good beliefs. So when you start to allow bad beliefs to spring, then you have a lot of challenges. And those are the kind of things that we want to work against as religious leaders. The other question, can you refresh me a little bit on the second aspect?
Yes, I will do that. The second question was, to what extent can the common challenge of COVID-19 promote unity of faith in Nigeria?
Well, I think that we can work together because COVID-19 has been expressed today. It's no respecter of status or anything. So whether you are imam or a bishop or archbishop or high and low, I think that we must even come together and I don't know how this will happen, maybe the presidential task force and we can expand the campaign for us to support widespread testing and tracing. Now, there's a lot that we can do as religious bodies. We can help to trace, we can help to give confidence, we can help to allay the fear, and we can work with whether Muslims or Christians or people of other faith. It is a common humanity that is at stake. And by seizing the kind of opportunities that this afford, will bring us together. At least we will have conversation and communication at the deepest level. I think action, faith in action, makes a radical difference to the position that we find ourselves.
Thank you very much, sir. I think that was a very, very sort of in-depth response to those questions. I think I have time for just one more question, and I would like to squeeze in a question from Johnson SS Zubo. And this is something, again, to do with justice in Nigeria. So I will direct it at Mr. Mahmood. And I read, one major problem of our time is that there is no justice in Nigeria. And where there is no justice, unity and peace become difficult. How can we overcome this challenge, particularly this time that COVID-19 has shown that we do not have to discriminate against, but love one another? Be interested in what is happening to others and not just yourself and members of your immediate community or tribe. Well, it's not really, just said there's no justice in Nigeria, but and segued into the question, but I'll direct that at Mr. Mahmood, please.
Well, thank you, Troy. I hope it's not being directed at me because I'm a lawyer. Justice is a common endeavor for everyone. And I think Professor Gambari alluded to that when he talks about peace being a foundation of any progressive society, and there can be peace without justice. So yes, we as lawyers have particular interest and engagement because we work within the justice sector, and we've spent all our lives more or less trying to, support the administration of justice. And I think the person who asked the question is right. Justice is very poor in Nigeria in terms of its administration and in terms of the expectations of citizens. And so the responsibility to address this is all of us, whether we're lawyers or non-lawyers, citizens, ordinary citizens. Everybody has to understand the responsibility, and it begins with on individual actions and individual responses to situations. So we must imbibe the values of being fair and being, responsible towards each other and caring for each other. But also, the state has its own responsibility in terms of making sure that justice is properly administered. And I hope that this pandemic will provide us an opportunity to address not just the issues of justice, but also all the issues that have bedeviled our endeavors and development as a country. And I think this is a big opportunity for us to end these lamentations about and gloom about our country. The doom and gloom that we always sing about our country. But let us look at the positive sides. Let us look at what are the fundamentals that we need to address in order to actualize the vision for a greater and more prosperous and peaceful country. And one of it is foundations of equal justice before the law. So I hope I've responded to that adequately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambo. Thank you so much for that. I will take one final question, and then we will go to the last comments. So just a minute, final thoughts from all our panelists. But before that, we have Dr. Yemi Akibami from Ghana, who has also posed a question, and I'm going to open this up for any one of my panelists to take. It says that, how can we hone in on the maxim, faith and fate? Will our faith, is it enough to determine our fate? How can we hone in on the maxim, faith and fate, to re-engineer a peaceful future for all Nigerians? So I'll just, I don't know who, if I don't want to call on, if anybody would take this quickly.
Okay. I think if you see the major religions, I know for sure in Islam, it says that there's a verse that, and maybe A.B. Mahmoud can help me out here, is a better Islamic scholar than myself. I self-confess. But it says that the Almighty Allah says not change the material condition of a people unless they are prepared to change themselves. Mm-hmm. And put very simply, and it's also in other religions and Christian religions that heaven helps those who help themselves. So it's not a question of choice between faith and, or take a deterministic position that your faith must determine your fate. Your faith is both in your hands and ultimately in the hands of the Almighty God. But I'm treading on very thin waters here. I think maybe either His Grace, the Most Reverend Stephen, can help me out. But I believe that you cannot say, well, we leave everything in the hands of God. And that's why many conversations about Nigerian challenges, oh, let's leave them to God. And God will help us out. Yes, we must have faith, but we must also take matters into our hands and do what we can individually, collectively, as communities, in order to get to where we want to go.
Thank you very much, sir. I don't know if
well, I think he has spoken, eloquently, and it's fine. I would just, in spite of everything, we also say the grace of God is, there finally to help us out from whichever position.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think I believe that the audience, even though with all the questions, we have taken most of them. And I think that last question from Ghana was actually a good way to segue into the concluding part of this webinar, where we have talked about, we're talking about unity, faith, peace, and progress. And it is clear that there has to be unity, there has to be tolerance, there has to be dialogue, we need to strengthen our institutions, we need to respect the Constitution, There has to be leadership. And we have really gone deeply into this. And of course, the role of peace in putting all of this forward. On that note, we talked also a bit about communications. We talked about dissemination of information to the masses. And this is something that I believe that perhaps we could have done better. There is technology that could have driven that. Certainly, I will speak for the Bank of Industry. We do have technology that can reach out through a platform to as many as 5 million, 10 million, 20 million Nigerians at the bottom of the pyramid. And so given the opportunity, we could use, or we could have used that platform to reach out and disseminate in a language that people would better understand, working through their market leaders, trade associations, community leaders, and the like. It is important that dissemination happens because we're talking about 80% of Nigerians not being on the same platforms that I believe a lot of us that are at this webinar today can access. So on that note, I would like to do a 1-minute fire session with the panelists. And I would like them to, I know we've talked about it in different ways, but I would like them in 1 minute to look at the situation in Nigeria today, where the nation has begun to ease the lockdown order. And so it requires proper conduct, honesty, discipline. But we know that this is not the case, or this has not been the case. And in 1 minute, I would like to hear from the panelists. So I'll do 1 minute each on how do they see this situation? What should be the role of religious and secular leaders? What should be done at this time? 1 minute each, and I'll start with Mr. Mahmood.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand, the need to perhaps look at this in terms of what can we do. But I want to just use my 1 minute to remind us that we're still probably at the early stage of this pandemic in Nigeria. So talking about lockdown or easing the lockdown and so on and so forth, we have to be very careful about it. There's immense suffering going on, and it appears we're in a dangerous phase of the transmission of the disease. And I'd just like to quote from a friend who is a victim of this disease from Kano. He's now in isolation in Kano. He sent me a text just yesterday night. He had lost his brother to COVID about a week ago, and he fell ill. He was all by himself because he didn't want anybody to go near him so that he did not infect the person. And then we kept communicating on telephone until he sent me this text, which I quote. He said, "I tested positive and they're coming to pick me up. I will fight it and win, inshallah." So he's now in the isolation center. Now, this is the spirit that I like, of taking responsibility, of being positive, at the same time remembering that everything is in the hands of God. That's what inshallah means, God willing. So, but I want us to remember the suffering and the dire situation a lot of people are, and let us try to help. Let the focus not be on how do we unlock ourselves and get back to business as usual. Of course, we have to address that, but we're still perhaps at the early stages of the pandemic. And a lot of compassion and help and support is needed by a lot of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll pass this on to Professor Gambari, sir.
Yes, 1 minute. Okay. Just want to make the point that this COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic has come, and inshallah, by God's grace, with unity, with commitment, we shall overcome. But there will be many more challenges, and what is very important is to use this pandemic as an opportunity for us as Nigeria to recognize that in meeting the challenges, we are in this together. We have to be truly our brother's keeper and use it also as an opportunity to reorder our national priority, to put our resources in the most productive areas. And also, I think, to rebuild our institution and to rebuild the trust that is really very badly lacking between the leaders and the people of this country. A friend of mine sent a question, if you can permit me to, a statement. It says, nothing we do along the line of faith, respect for science and technology, compliance with the state laws will be meaningful unless we value soulfulness, that is finding space for the love of one another for his own sake. It we care for the needs of the soul that we will bind us all together in moral readiness to effectively defend humanity against the unseen COVID-19 or any plague at all. This is from Dr. Adewale Adeyo, right here in Lagos. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And finally, sir.
Thank you very much. Before this webinar on COVID-19, I was reflecting, personal reflection on our Lord's Prayer. For those people who are not of Christian faith, it's a simple thing, our Father in heaven and so on. But as I reflected, I discovered that the language of that prayer is totally inclusive. Our Father, regardless of race, color, creed, tribe, whatever, because all of us stand before God in need of salvation from sin. All need daily bread. All pray to be delivered from evil. And so we are all caught up in this country, indeed the whole world, faced with this COVID-19 pandemic. We all share one common humanity. Therefore, my concluding remark and expectation is that we should ask God of our faiths to help us to help each other so that we bear the cross for each other. Let us afford, let us each its friendly aid afford, whatever we can afford, and feel our brothers and sisters' care. And by so doing, we would have lessened the impact of COVID-19. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Please permit me again to repeat the words of Aurelius, that if we can unite, irrespective of creed or culture, we can live in peace and together fight this menace that has eroded our world. On this note, I would like to say a very big thank you to our panelists. It has been a great pleasure to moderate the discussion. To our audience here and in other parts of the world, I would like to say a big thank you for joining the webinar and for your fantastic. Next week, Emmanuel Church will host another webinar, and it will be a discussion on the state of states. That will be leading the discussion. That will be next week, Friday, and we hope to see you all at that webinar. Thank you all, and I wish you a pleasant evening and a great weekend. Keep well and stay safe. Thank you very much.